Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child in Life podcast. Military families are not like your traditional family. They are strong, brave, resilient, and some of the most incredible people I know. My name is Gracie, a U.S. Army BRAT, and I am your host. I am honored to be able to give military family members like myself a place for them to share their stories and experiences in the military life. Stay tuned for this week's guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Kristen, who is a military brat herself and also a military spouse and a Gold Star child. So, Kristen, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you tell us what it's like for you, what you've experienced, and what it was like for you growing up?
Yeah, so man, there's so many different areas to it that are really cool, but
Right.
it was definitely an adventure, moving around a lot and then just experiencing different cultures and just meeting new friends in every place you went, but also having to say goodbye to those friends everywhere you went. I would say that there's like struggles with it, but then cool parts of it. So yeah, it was an experience that I would never change about my childhood. It was amazing. But yeah, and then, going into in high school, my dad was killed in Afghanistan when I was 17. So growing up, it was full military childhood up until then. And then when that happened, obviously, like the trajectory of my future completely changed and it just altered our whole family. And yeah. But
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, and I was saying the same thing with Kelly, it's definitely different because you look at today and, Gold Star children, and they were mostly younger when their, mom or dad was killed in action. And so, you have a completely different experience where you got to live that traditional military lifestyle for just about all of your childhood before, that was tragically taken away from you.
right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point too. It just being so much older, it was one of those things where you didn't really think that it was going to happen, and I mean,
Right.
you're like, oh, we made it through the childhood and you've always heard throughout, like I've heard from different people saying like that's the military family's nightmare kind of is seeing those
Right.
men walk up to your doorstep and just experiencing that. But being 17, it was like, oh, I don't know, not, you can always expect something bad to happen. Or like, it's not totally out of the question, but just in our minds, you don't think it's going to be you
Right.
until it happens. And yeah, so it was a very different experience because he was a year away from retiring and he wasn't necessarily deployed over there. He had just gone over for like a 2-week TDY.
Right.
So that on top of it was like, oh, he said goodbye. It happened, I think, 2 to 3 days after we said goodbye to him at home. So it
Wow.
was just wild. Yeah, very
Yeah.
unexpected.
Especially when you get that, I mean, yes, you were older and that, you don't expect it at those ages, but as you get that close to retirement, you don't think it happens because you look at
Right.
all of these, lower enlisted or, fresh entering into the military. And that's unfortunately, especially when the Afghanistan-Iraq wars kicked off, that is especially was the
Right.
target. Um, you know, that was the main audience or the main group of people that were
Right.
experiencing these life-changing, incidents where you have more Gold Star brothers and sisters and moms and dads and
Yeah.
you don't necessarily think of it, especially being that close to retirement and then adding on that it was just like, a 2-week TUI that, you're
Right.
expecting everything to go smoothly and, you don't necessarily worry as much.
hmm Yeah, exactly. And another part kind of to my story with that too is at the time my brother was also deployed. Well,
Mm,
he was deployed to Iraq. So here I am at home, like we were homeschooled. So I was doing my homeschool, my work at the table, and when we were notified. And in my mind at the moment, like my mind is my brother's in Iraq, my dad is in
Right.
Afghanistan. Like, who wanted to, you're seeing these
What
people come up
happened?
to the door, like, what happened? Which one of my family members is it? And I feel like
Right.
that having that weight, I guess, as a military kid, and any military family, whether you have, sons, daughters serving, or aunts and uncles, like whatever it might be, is that, that underlying fear when they get deployed or if they go to a dangerous place, that's kind of, there. But I just look back and I'm like, it's just crazy to me in the moment. It's like, I don't know who it is. But my
Right.
dad is, right. Something bad happened, but like, who was, until they actually said. And my mom, from talking to her, she said like she knew deep down in her heart because for other factors, but when she saw them coming up to the house, she knew. So, but yeah, it's just wild. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a crazy experience, especially how much, our parents, our moms know deep down that something has happened and
Yeah.
you don't even have to know. I'll never forget, my mom always said that because we were at Sam's Club and we were literally getting things to mail a Christmas care package over. We had just made Christmas cookies. My dad was in Afghanistan and he was psychological operations. So he was working a lot with Afghan children and they loved the American candy. So we'd always mail them that. And, the guys over there, they would, go crazy for American candy too and the taste of home.
Oh, yeah.
So we were getting all sorts of things to just put in a box and send over for Christmas. And she will never forget having to be at a stop sign at Sam's Club going to get gas and having to talk herself down because she just felt, this feeling that it was like something happened, something is wrong. And turns out we get back to the house and we get a phone call. And this was the second time they were trying to reach us. And the first time was at that same moment that she felt something happened. And so like she looked at the clock, it was, whatever time it was. And then, seeing the first voicemail come through at that same time, everything just correlates and there's, they have that gut feeling that, something happened.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, it really is. So transitioning, from the tragic lifestyle of a military child that you unfortunately had to experience into a military spouse, did you kind of have those same fears that, something similar would happen to your husband?
Yeah. So I feel like this is probably similar for maybe most military kids in the fact that, like I said, like, oh, I'm never gonna marry someone in the military,
yes.
Especially after that
I
too,
sure
but
said
just
the
in
same
general,
thing.
never gonna do
and
it.
now I'm like, okay, maybe it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to college and that's where I met my husband, and he's a military brat too. So we just like bonded in so many ways because our childhoods were so similar. So then it felt more natural. It was like just a really familiar thing to transition into being a military spouse from, having a military upbringing. So I feel like there were so many things that prepared me for it, but then also struggles. Yeah, I just say like the familiarity of it was maybe for someone who hadn't had a military childhood, it would be like a little more scary, but it was almost scarier thinking about just settling down in one place and not being around military people. I mean, I wasn't in college a little bit, but so that part of it was really familiar and helpful, I think, as I entered into that phase. The other thing is just moving around and as a kid and meeting friends and then leaving them, I think has been a little bit of a struggle for me, maybe in the military spouse life as we move around. And I think that kind of still comes with me, like, oh, we're going to leave. Anyways, so maybe why initiate certain friendships or something, which is not a good mindset to have, by the way.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, experiencing the life of a military child. And because I was raised in a reserve family, we never really had that, super connection to a military base or a military community. Cleveland, Ohio is not, everywhere. It's like we appreciate the military and our veterans, but it's not that military rooted community. And so, moving to that military community in Texas was so, life changing. And then that being taken away from us when we moved and my dad retired, it was such a struggle, having that. So when you say that, that was almost scarier in a sense, like it really is. And I don't think, non-military kids and non-military family members can truly understand that because, that's what they grew up with. That's what they're familiar with. And we grew up with moving and traveling and, our parent always being gone or whatever way you want to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. That part of it was hard and struggle. So, but going back, I realized I missed your question. Going back with now with my husband in as far as like fears and stuff go, I have definitely seen that fear of losing my dad kind of infiltrate into now. But I think one of the most important things is I've had these conversations with my husband because, he knows and he obviously knows what we went through. So I've been a little bit more like on top of, if you are gone for a certain period of time, check in, make sure you tell me like where you are, which is actually a privilege that we have nowadays, which I know like a while ago they didn't have that. So I don't know, maybe it's not a good thing, but for me, it's been a very like it eases my anxiety a lot knowing, okay, he can check in. And I do give it a certain amount of time. If I haven't heard from him, I don't go straight into panic mode anymore. I think in the beginning it was a little bit harder. But he's been deployed a few times, and during those times too, specifically, he's given me like, okay, this is the timeline, but if you don't hear from me at this point, he's just kind of been very communicative, like with the timeline of things, so that way I don't sit back and like what is going on. There's been a few times where I have panicked a little bit, but it's ended up turning out okay. So yeah,
it can be so easy to spiral.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's hard to, we have these technology advancements that, we're very fortunate to have because like you said, you can check in, you can, hear from him and know he's okay. But at the same point, like it always goes back to that saying that, for what I understand has been around for a while. And my parents, raised me on of no news is good news. And so when you don't have someone, coming up to your house, knocking at your door, you don't have a random phone call, you can find some sort of, peace in that of knowing, even though it is easy to spiral, you can know that, okay, I don't have something random, a phone call randomly coming through or somebody coming to my house. Like I do, it's a little easier to find peace in that.
Right. Because especially like nowadays, if something were to happen, you would probably be able to be contacted fairly quickly compared to maybe times in the past. So yeah, absolutely. Sure. I think the other thing too, and I was just thinking about it with talking about like the feeling that my mom got when, we were notified and the feeling your mom got, when you guys were getting the phone call and everything. Sometimes I think back to, I'm like, if something were to have happened or happen, I do wonder if deep down I would just like know. And I think sometimes we can maybe confuse anxiety for that. But I do really think that if something ever were to like truly happen, it would be a different feeling maybe than that anxiety that is just regularly comes with them being gone or being in a dangerous, place or out on a mission or something like that. So sometimes I'm like, okay, I mean, I'm anxious, but like, I don't feel like something horrible has happened just yet. So I don't know if that's like valid or anything, but I just sometimes that comes to my mind. So anyway.
Yeah. Because if something does happen, I feel like, just life in general, we get this gut feeling. And that's why everyone always says to trust your gut instinct, right? So I think, hopefully that day never comes and, you never get that. But, that is always a possibility. And so, but it is so easy to get anxiety, confused with other with trying to find your gut feeling.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's another reason why building a community within wherever you are is so important too, because there have been times where, I felt uneasy or something. And just like if I'm hanging out with my friend, I can talk about it and she understands because like within the military community, and I do have civilian friends too. So, it can go all over, but with like the military community, having those close-knit friends helps when your husbands are away or your spouses are, away doing things that you can, oh, I'm feeling uneasy about whatever, and they can kind of be there to help you through that. So
Yeah. I think that even goes for military kids as well. Like having
yeah.
someone that understands what you're going through. Because, like you said, you have civilian friends as well. And, they understand to a certain extent. But military friends, whether that's a spouse or a child, they understand what you're going through because they're going through something similar, maybe not the same, but something similar. And so it's so much easier to kind of rely on them rather than, some other friends who may have not experienced it. And still to this day, I have other military, child caregiver friends who have gone through, you know, very similar situations that I have gone through. And those are my friends that I, gravitate more towards sometimes
Mhm.
just because of the nature of how we were raised and how we grew up
Right.
and shared experiences that we've had.
Right. It definitely creates a bond that's much, much different in
Yeah.
ways. So yeah.
Yeah. It's so important to have, like you said earlier, like it's hard to, put yourself out there when you're only going
Yes.
to be there for a short period of time. But
Yeah.
especially in, when you get an Oconus location or you're going to a place that's far away from where you grew up and your family and, a group of friends that you made at your last duty station. It's
Right.
hard to want to put yourself out there, but it's even more important to put yourself out there in those situations.
Right, exactly. That's pretty much where we were with coming up here. We're in Alaska right now, and our previous duty station was our first since we got married. And I met some amazing friends there, and I still keep in touch with them. But I remember when we moved, feeling like almost like I was betraying them for finding new friends, and which is completely unrealistic. Like they obviously were not expecting that. They wanted me to go make new friends, but
Right.
it was just that feeling like, oh, I'm moving on from them. But I'm always going to keep in touch with them, and it is so important when you're living so far away from friends and family to build that community. Um, which I've worked on and I've gotten a lot better here. We've met some amazing people, and have some really great friends here. But there have been those times too where, I meet a mom at the playground or something and we're talking and we hit it off and we're like, oh, oh, we could be friends kind of thing. And then she kind of mentions like, oh yeah, we're moving, we're PCSing in 2 months. And then you get that thought in your mind like, oh, okay, like, well, they're leaving anyways, we're probably never gonna connect again, so then you just don't initiate
Right.
more of a relationship, I guess. um but which is not, like I said, like that's probably not, it's not a good thing. We should just embrace where we're at, even if you only have a couple months, even if you only have 3 months, 2 months, whatever it is. Just those are the relationships that are put in your life at the moment, so kind of
Right.
embracing
Yeah,
that.
especially with how small, the entire military community is as a whole. You never know when you're going to cross paths with someone again. Like it could happen. The
Exactly.
chances are
Absolutely.
more rare, but it can happen. And
Yes.
you never know, what value they're going to add to your life and what value you're going to add to their life. And so I always feel that it's always great to make a connection. And if, the connection kind of fizzles out and, it goes nowhere, like at least you put yourself out there and try to make a connection. And maybe one day it'll come back around.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. The military is a small place. There's
It is.
definitely been those times where we've connected with people that have been like, years apart and in random places, and then all of a sudden you meet up again. So yeah,
Right.
it happens.
Yeah. And so you also crochet, and you have a little
Yes.
crochet business, and I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure to ask you about that. And you did
Yeah.
something very special. I know this is not airing in April, but you did
Yes.
something very special for April and Month of the Military Child. So can you share more about that?
Yes. So month of the military child is April, obviously. And this year I just wanted to do something a little bit more special for it. I'm a crochet pattern designer, so I enjoy designing patterns, and I've been doing that for a couple of years. And I remember in the middle of April last year, I was like, oh, I should do something for this. And then it was kind of too late at that point, but I put it on my list of projects to do this year. And I remembered ahead of time. I was so excited, and I was able to design the Dauntless Dandelion pattern, crochet pattern. So it's been really fun, and it's just a way for me to kind of represent military kids in a special way. That's also, part of me and my love for crocheting. So the Dauntless Dandelion pattern released in April. And also, I was crocheting little finished dandelions that could also be purchased. But yeah, just a way to give back. And some of the proceeds are going to the Johnny Mac Soldiers Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that was started in 2014. Yep, their 10-year anniversary, actually. So kind of cool. But started to help with scholarships for kids, which I know you had mentioned before with you and your sister. So yeah, they've done amazing things. And it was just kind of my way to give back to the military community. And it's been really fun. It's been really fun to see and hear people coming with their stories of their upbringing in the military or raising their own kids now in the military and who they're giving their dandelions to. And
Oh,
it's
I
been
love
really exciting.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I know my sister made some and sold some, but
Yeah.
it's really cool to see just so many people, come together over, one thing that represents the military community. And I think the dandelion is just, so special,
Yeah.
for military kids and families as a whole. But to see other people, like you said, sharing their stories, sharing their experiences, I think that is just something so special that we can all bond over and, raise awareness. And then, also,
Yeah.
I love that you're not only just taking the money but also giving it back to the military community, and it's like a very very much a full circle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun. And I didn't realize I had learned about the dandelion a year or so ago, maybe a couple years ago, that it was actually like the flower that represented military children. And I had learned about it. And I was like, that is just so cool because it's true. Dandelions are really hard to destroy. They grow wherever. They completely take over your yard. But
Right.
the fact that like it is true, military kids, bloom wherever they're planted, and they're resilient and they're strong. And when I learned about that first tie to the dandelion, I was like, this is the coolest thing. And I didn't realize there were a few people who hadn't heard of it either throughout my like introducing the Dauntless Dandelion crochet pattern and everything. So I thought that was cool to kind of spread awareness in that way and share just a fun little encouraging representation of military kids. It's been really
Yeah,
fun.
I always remember being a child and growing up, and in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, there are tons of dandelions just because of
Yeah.
the climate. And so I would always pick them, I'd always blow them into the wind, but I don't think I really understood the connection and how much a dandelion actually would mean to me later on in life.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool, not only that military kids have a flower to represent them, but also that, it is such, I mean, you don't necessarily think of a dandelion as a flower all the time immediately. You think of it
Right.
as a weed.
As a
And
weed, yes.
so it's really cool to see something that, most people would try and get rid of turned into something that's so meaningful and so powerful. Like I have it tattooed on my back now, like a little dandelion.
Oh, that's
And,
awesome.
it's really just, it's something special to military kids. And, like I said, it's a weed. It's not something you would, have, be in awe over. But us military kids, here we are in awe over it. And so I think that makes it
Yes.
even more special.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I love that. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Absolutely. And where can listeners, find more about you and your crochet patterns at?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. It's at Junebug and James. So Junebug and James is my business name. I also have a website. It's junebugandjames.com. And my shop is Junebug and James on Etsy. So that's where my crochet patterns are. But I'm on pretty much most social platforms. I guess I'm also on Facebook. So not as active on Facebook, but Instagram is where you can find me mostly. That's where I share a lot of new ideas and patterns and just life stuff. So
yeah, Instagram's the best. I love it.
It is. I love it. Yes. It's so fun.
And so the last thing I do want to ask you is what advice, would you give to another military child or even another military spouse? What would you tell them?
Oh man, so many things. Oh, I think the biggest thing I would say, and I know we talked about this probably a lot, but it's just really embracing where you are, and making friends and making a community where you are, because that really makes or breaks where you can end up and where you can be in your life, and just embracing, but not only within the military community, but really get outside of where you are and explore the areas that you're in and find cool things to do. Really just embrace it, because it's a really cool life. And, there's a lot of fears and anxiety and things that go into it. But if you can just set those aside and really embrace where you are, I think it makes for a really, really fulfilling life. So, yeah.
Yeah. Especially getting outside of, the installation, you're on. You can feel like you're trapped in there to a certain extent sometimes, but it's really important to get outside of that, especially, you're probably never going to get another opportunity to live in some of those places, like, Alaska. Yeah. Like, how cool is that? And, it's on almost everyone's bucket list to go there and see the Northern Lights from Alaska. Mm-hmm. And, it's hard to get those opportunities again. So when you're given those opportunities, really going out there and really experiencing them for yourself is huge.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Finding all the cool restaurants, finding all the cool hikes, or just things to go do is, it is cool. It's unlike any other types of, lifestyles. And I know some other lifestyles do move around a bit, but it's just to go to cool places and actually like really experience the culture in them is really neat. So
yeah, my dad always says he kind of ruined us with food because, growing up in Cleveland, we had so many different cultures there. So we were exposed to that. And then moving to Texas, Tex-Mex, Mexican food, like we had legit stuff there. Yeah. And then here in Florida, we get good seafood and, a couple of other things here and there. But, we never really, when we think about going somewhere to eat, we don't think about the fast food chains or, the restaurant chains. We think of, okay, we want to, this specific spot from Texas that we really want. And there's just nowhere like it here. So it's really hard to replicate those places. So like we go back to Texas and we bring a cooler with us so we can go shopping at H-E-B and get
I love that.
Certain things. So it's really, finding the restaurants is really, really fun where you are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for being on the podcast and sharing what it was like growing up as a military kid and now being a military spouse.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, follow, and comment. Also, be sure to check out Instagram and Facebook at Grace of a Military Child and Life for more awesome content. For information on the podcast, Military Child Bigs and Littles, Go AMCL blog, or other resources, visit www.goamcl.org. You can also email me at Gracie, that's GRACIE @GOAMCL.org with any questions or comments. To be a guest on the podcast, you can schedule it at www.goamcl.org/schedule a podcast, all one word, or contact me via social media or email. Stay tuned for the next episode where another incredible story is shared.